You are listening to the Primitive Intelligence Podcast, episode 603, The Disappearance of Harry Lane. A story that almost didn't get out. I'll explain that in a minute. I do apologize if this goes on air, if it goes live a little bit late. I am recording morning of. Had a bunch of stuff to get taken care of yesterday. And by the time I got done and was like, okay, time for dinner, and then I'll go record the podcast. I came downstairs to start making dinner. It was already 10 o'clock p.m. So I just got everything together, went to bed, got up, and I'm recording now. So I want to welcome everybody who has started listening on Rumble. And if you're not familiar with what Rumble is, it's a YouTube-like platform, videos, live streams, and things like that. Start putting the episodes up on there last season and starting to get people checking them out. So that's awesome. Welcome to the show. And if you found me on Rumble and you're looking for other ways to listen to the podcast, it is available on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube Music, YouTube itself. You can find us on Podcast Addict, pretty much anywhere where podcasts are available. I host on Spotify, and they disseminate it to everybody. So you can pretty much find us. If you've gone to the website and you've noticed it's not there anymore, it does direct to the Spotify page now. Up until last season, including last season, I put a lot of time into building the website, making the episode pages and putting episode art up, doing galleries, doing back episodes, seasons, show notes, all that stuff, which a lot of that is available on Spotify. Since I start hosting with them, they don't break it down into seasons, but they do give you all the episodes. But I start looking at the analytics for the webpage itself, and very, very, very few people were actually going and looking at the information. It seemed like a lot of the hits that it was getting were just probably bots going out and looking for web pages that were active. So very few people were actually going to the content. So I just decided, you know what, that's a lot of time right now to be putting into a page that people aren't watching. So I just have it going right to the Spotify page. And then in the future, should the show really take off, and I've still got the website, I got everything there, it's just not active right now. It's a lot of time I can save putting up the podcast, putting it on, because I upload it to Spotify, and I upload it to YouTube, and I upload it to Rumble. So it goes to all three spots. And then to do that and build the webpage on top of it takes up a pretty decent chunk of day. So just saving some time. I do have other things that I do. So that just saves me some time. So until it looks like I'm getting more views there, or if people start going, hey, what happened to the website? It'll stay like that. So that's what we're going to talk about before the podcast. We're going to get into it now. So episode 603 of the Primitive Intelligence Podcast starts now. I am armed with coffee, and I've got a story for you. This story takes place back in the 1800s, and it starts in the town of Washington, Pennsylvania, which is just south of Pittsburgh. And you got to keep in mind, this is at a different time. Like today, we take for granted things like podcasts and internet and cell phones and text messages and all this stuff and instant information. And you can find out anything. Headlines get pushed to your phone. You don't have to look for news. It just comes and finds you, which isn't always the greatest thing, I guess. So back in these days, it was completely different, and it allows for stories like this. Now, a lot of this, like I said, to be fair on time and to help get this out, I do have this written out as kind of a script, and it's kind of simplified. The story was actually very hard to find. Last season, I did a lot more UFO and UAP related episodes, and I love those stories, but I don't want to just do those stories. So I'm trying to find more information, find more stories, because there's a lot of interesting things out there. And that's the whole point of this podcast, is to find the interesting, regardless of whether it's UFO, UAP, or if it's paranormal, or if it's just these mysteries or scientific or whatever, what have you. So I started searching for just big mysteries in the U.S. And a lot of them I've either already talked about, or really, to me, they weren't interesting. So I started narrowing it down to Pennsylvania. And on the one list, this story, this disappearance of Harry Lane, was like top on the list. And I'd never heard this name before. And I thought, so I immediately put that aside. I'm like, I want to look into that. And I looked at a bunch of other ones, and all right, this is the one I want to look at. So I start searching the disappearance of Harry Lane, and I can find very little information about it. I find one story that pops up, and it's like part 5 of 5 about Harry Lane. And I go look at it, and I'm like, okay, here's this is the story I'm looking for. Because there's other Harry Lanes. They're two pretty common names, first name and last name. So there's a few other stories that came up that weren't associated with this at all. And so I go to that story. That's part 5 of 5. And when you only find one part of a story online, it's pretty easy to look at the URL, see how the URL is created. And this one actually said the last thing was part 5 with the word 5 written out. So I said, okay, well, if that's part 5, then the URLs are probably part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5. So I type in part 1, replace part 5 with part 1, page not found. Page not found. I'm like, oh, that's weird. So I put page 1 as the number 1. Nothing. Okay, that's interesting. I just take page 1 or part 1 out and see if I can find the main story. Can't find that. I do that for a while, and I can find parts 3, 4, and 5, but not parts 1 and 2. And I'm like, this is really bizarre. So I start looking for, just scouring the internet, looking for this story, and I can't find anything. I go to ChatGPT, and I say, tell me the story of the disappearance of Harry Lane. And it's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Never heard of this story before. Can you give me more information? So, Washington, Pennsylvania, late 1800s. Man disappears. Nope. Can't find anything. All right. So I look into the new AI from Google. It's called Gemini. So I look at that, and I say, tell me the story of Harry Lane. And it gives me a very basic story, but I can't get it to really elaborate. They're not really meant for big stories. A little bit of information, and just basically, this guy Harry Lane disappeared, and it's a mystery. That's basically what it tells me. So I'm like, okay, I got to find the rest of the story, because it's obviously there's something there, but the fact that I can't find it now has me more intrigued. So I do a little bit more sleuthing. I start looking for the story name, parts of the URL, searching those, and I wind up finding it, amazingly enough. And I'm like, oh, this is incredible. So I read the story, I get it all together, and I've got it written into kind of a script. It was 5 parts, and I'm not going to read somebody's exact story. So here are some of the highlights I got from the story. I hope you guys enjoy it. It's written as more of a script. It's just because, interest of time, I want to get this edited faster. And when I'm just talking off the hip like this, a lot of times I have a lot of ums and ahs, and I try to edit those out. Going to try to cut that down. So if this is a little rougher sounding this week, I apologize, but this is what we got. So let's go ahead with the disappearance of Harry Lane. On a warm Saturday night in June 1893, Harry Eastman Lane, aged 25, mysteriously disappeared, sparking a flurry of investigation into what seemed to be a murder case, despite the absence of a body. The evidence unfolded in the village of Pancake which, by the way, I looked into. I can't find anything about this village of Pancake. I thought maybe this was an error, but no, apparently this was a real place. The village of Pancake, just east of Washington, where Harry was last seen by friends at Jim Chambers' store and post office. Harry, described as an athletic young man, engaged in casual conversation with acquaintances, bought cigars, and left around 9 p.m. Riding off on his horse, this departure marked the final sighting of Harry Lane by his friends, leaving a void of uncertainty around his fate. The circumstances surrounding Harry Lane's disappearance unfolded against the backdrop of a sweltering summer day, with temperatures soaring and Harry spending the bulk of his day selling goods in Greene County from his wagon. Harry, who had recently transitioned from farm labor to peddling produce and goods as a huckster, was striving to secure financial stability amidst economic challenges, including the aftermath of a recent stock market crash. Despite the economic turbulence, Harry saw promise in the burgeoning oil and gas industry in Washington County, which inspired his entrepreneurial endeavors. Married to Clara Berkeley with a young daughter, Grace, Harry's life was intertwined with the rhythms of rural existence. Yet his ambitions and connections reached into a wider community. As the day transitioned into evening, Harry's movements were traced by witnesses who reported seeing him enter and leave Washington, supposedly on his way to collect a significant sum of money. His friends encountered him at the crossroads, where he declined an invitation to join them at a local event, citing the need to retrieve money sent by express. Emma Neese provided further insight into Harry's movements, confirming his presence in Washington around 8 p.m. Yet despite these accounts, Harry failed to return home, raising suspicions and intensifying efforts to unravel the mystery of his disappearance. The disappearance of Harry Lane remains a compelling enigma, casting a shadow over the tight-knit community and leaving unanswered questions about his fate. Or does it? After a night of revelry at Myers Barn, Stuart Early and Daniel Lane, Harry's younger brother, stumbled upon Harry's horse grazing by the roadside near the Lane neighborhood. Perturbed by the absence of Harry and the horse's disheveled appearance, they took the animal to the Lane family stable before continuing their search for Harry. Upon returning to Harry's home, his wife confirmed his absence, prompting concern. The discovery of Harry's horse and the subsequent search efforts by Early and Daniel, including a brief return to town, fueled speculation and heightened apprehension within the community. As news of Harry's disappearance spread, locals descended upon the area, drawn by curiosity and rumors of foul play. The discovery of Harry's hat and bloody handkerchiefs suggest of a violent altercation, intensified suspicions of murder. Despite conflicting theories circulating, including speculation about financial troubles or Harry staging his death, Harry's family and friends vehemently denied such allegations, portraying him as a responsible and respectable individual. The absence of a body perplexed law enforcement officials, prompting a frenzied search for evidence and clues to unravel the mystery. Coffee break. Let me take a sip. I love some hazelnut coffee. The search for Harry's body intensified the following day, with a large contingent of volunteers scouring the woods and fields for any trace of him. The examination of Harry's blood-soaked hat by local doctors dispelled speculation that the blood was from a chicken, confirming it to be mammalian, likely human. The discovery of a blood-stained stone near the hat further underscored the potential violence of Harry's fate, as Robert Johnson Lane, Harry's father, offered a reward for information leading to the discovery of his son's body. The community's determination to uncover the truth intensified, reflecting a collective resolve to bring closure to the baffling disappearance of Harry Lane. The investigation of Harry Lane's disappearance took a new turn as drops of blood were discovered along the road leading to his house later in the week. These drops, initially obscured by dust from the search activity, became visible after a rain. The district attorney, coroner, and county detective William McBride concluded experiments with Harry's horse, leading them to theorize that Harry's body had been placed over the horse with his head facing east, explaining the presence of blood on that side of the lane. The horse had likely been led to a specific location before the body was transferred to another conveyance. Suspicion fell on John Zediker, a neighbor with a history of animosity towards the Lane family. McBride obtained a search warrant for Zediker's property, leading to an exhaustive search of his farm and nearby areas, including an oil tank where Harry's body was suspected to have been dumped. As rumors and tensions escalated within the community, details of past conflicts between Zediker and the Lanes emerged, fueling public animosity towards Zediker. The search for Harry's body intensified as rewards were offered, drawing volunteers from far and wide. Dragging operations were conducted in bodies of water, and teams scoured the hills and coal banks from Washington to Bentleyville. Despite the exhaustive efforts, Harry's whereabouts remained elusive, adding to the anguish endured by his family. Claire Lane, accompanied by relatives, sought solace in a change of scenery, departing for Illinois amidst ongoing investigation. The intertwining of the Lane and Berkeley families through their church affiliations hinted at possible connections that led to Claire and Harry's union, providing context to their shared history and community ties. On Monday, June 26, over 2 weeks following Harry Lane's disappearance, a massive search involving nearly 800 men scoured South Straben Township for any trace of his body. The community's unwavering belief in Harry's murder fueled their determined efforts, with each participant driven by the conviction that Harry's body was concealed somewhere in the vicinity. Despite the farmers' pressing agricultural duties, their commitment to the search underscored the gravity of the situation and the pervasive sense of loss within their community. The search parties, meticulously organized, converged on a large cornfield above John Zediker's house, prompting some to request permission from County Detective William McBride to search the Zediker residence. Zediker's absence that day averted potential confrontation as the crowd, emboldened by suspicion, descended on the property, scrutinizing over every corner for clues. The presence of Zediker's family added to the tension as onlookers probed the grounds for any indication of foul play. The exhaustive search extended to other properties, including Thomas Zediker's residence, but yielded no significant findings. As weeks passed, with little progress, desperation prompted alternative measures, including consultations with fortune tellers and revisiting earlier accounts, such as a report of 2 mysterious men seen near Zediker's station on the night of Harry's disappearance. Despite initial skepticism, renewed attention to these details added layers to the mystery, reigniting public interest and speculation about Harry's fate. With dwindling volunteer numbers and waning enthusiasm, doubts crept in, challenging the once solid certainty of Harry's murder. The lingering questions shifted from who killed Harry to, if he's still alive, where did he go and why did he leave? As summer faded into winter, the search for Harry's body waned, and rumors about his potential escape to Canada or the western states circulated. Yet with no tangible evidence to confirm his whereabouts, Harry Lane remained a haunting enigma, leaving his family and community to grapple with the unresolved grief and uncertainty. Harry Lane's family, his brothers, sisters, and parents, were already having issues. Remember, this is right after the stock market crash, so everyone was in a little bit of a bind. They wound up having to sell their home. They filed bankruptcy. They had to rent a place, which they had never had to do before. There was one of his sisters gained an inheritance from an uncle or someone who had passed away. The courts took out of the inheritance of $100, which was a lot back then, took $91 of that and left her with $9. So it was a crazy time. So, and of course, they're dealing with the loss of Harry, and the younger children were actually getting sent to neighbors, friends, and employers during all this. So it was just a crazy time for them. The disappearance of Harry Lane left a lingering sense of mystery and speculation within the community, fueled by fueled by the ease with which individuals could vanish in an era devoid of modern surveillance and communication technologies. While some believed Harry had orchestrated his disappearance, suspicions of foul play persisted, perpetuating the unresolved mystery around his fate. Years later, a discovery near Zediker Station reignited speculation about Harry's demise, only to be debunked as the remains of a calf. Despite persistent efforts, Harry's fate remained elusive, leaving his loved ones grappling with unanswered questions and unresolved grief for decades. Now, decades after Harry's disappearance, technological advancements facilitated the resolution of this long-standing mystery. Now remember, he disappeared at a time where there was no internet. Everything was recorded on paper. These records could be lost. You could go 50 miles away. No one would know where you are. Through online genealogical research, Harry Lane's whereabouts were finally uncovered, revealing his relocation to California, where he lived with his family under a new identity. The revelation brought closure to a century-old mystery, shedding light on Harry's fate and dispelling long-held speculations surrounding his disappearance. Robert Lane's great-granddaughter, Linda Stanley, provided valuable insights into the family's history, offering a glimpse into Harry's life post-disappearance and unraveling the truth behind the enigmatic saga of Harry Lane. The circumstances surrounding Harry Lane's disappearance suggested a carefully orchestrated plan rather than a sudden act of violence. Dan Lane and Stuart Early's accounts, coupled with the discovery of a bloody hat, indicate a staged scene designed to convey Harry's demise. The presence of Harry's horse further supports the theory that he left intentionally, possibly to hop a freight train bound for unknown destinations. Keep in mind, there was reports back in 1893 about these two men who seemed very suspicious, who hopped a train near that Zediker farm. And this was reported by a bunch of kids, and nobody really took them seriously. But it seems like maybe they were right, and who they saw hop the train was Harry. Questions linger regarding who else may have been privy to Harry's plan, and whether Clara Lane, his wife, was complicit or genuinely unaware of her husband's intentions. Her departure for Illinois shortly after Harry's disappearance raises suspicions, suggesting potential involvement or knowledge of his scheme. Harry's subsequent whereabouts remain shrouded in mystery, with gaps in timeline between 1893 and 1896. However, records confirm his presence in California by fall of 1898, where he and Clara resided until her death in 1921. The Lane family's reaction to Harry's disappearance raises further questions, with conflicting accounts and speculations about their knowledge or involvement in the scheme. Robert Lane Sr.'s handling of Harry's debts and the family's eventual relocation to California add complexity to the narrative. The Lane family's later years were marked by tragedy, with Daniel Lane's suicide in 1916 and Robert and Sarah Lane's passing in 1918 and 1926, respectively. In contrast, Harry Eastman Lane lived a comparatively quiet life, working as a newspaper sales agent and eventually retiring to live with his daughter and grandchildren until his death in 1948. The present-day landscape offers little hint of the dramatic events that unfolded over a century ago. The old Lane family house, now owned by the Podish family, stands as a silent witness to the mysteries of the past, reflecting on the tumultuous events of Harry Lane's disappearance. One can't help but imagine the anxiety and uncertainty that gripped the community in those bygone days. The only real place I could find this story was the Observer Reporter, and that's a Washington, PA newspaper. I'll be honest, I don't know if they even are still in operation. That was from a while ago. The website's still up, and I was able to pull that story from there. But can you imagine this entire town, the effort, the time, the money, the uncertainty that was placed on this town? When they had 800 men and women out searching for this guy, going through this guy's farm, Zedeker. This guy was accused. That had to ruin his reputation. That couldn't have been good for him. Now, obviously, the families had issues with each other, so the Lanes probably didn't really care. But that's a messed up thing to do. Like, they went through this guy's farm. They made him drain his oil tank. Like, just the damage that was done to his business, to his farm. These people who took time out of their lives to search this guy, and he just up and left. Now, there was no information about, they say he went under a different identity, but it doesn't say what his identity was and how through genetics they tracked him down. But like, his wife, she had to know. She had to know. His brothers and his friend, they had to know. So what I'm thinking is, this guy, he decided to split town, right? Him and his wife were like, hey, we're out. Let's get out of here. They just dumped everything. That was the easiest way to do it. Let his family know, let his friend know, because they all wound up in California with him. It seems like a pretty big coincidence that this isn't that much of a mystery. It doesn't seem like this is that much of a mystery. This is very much portrayed as this unsolved case, but it's very much solved. And maybe the information I saw where it was unsolved was before these genealogical records were released. But yeah, can you imagine that? Like, that couldn't happen today. You couldn't just up and leave and just disappear. It would take so much more because of, just cameras. People have cameras. They would, you'd be very easy. You'd have to get plastic surgery and change your appearance. You would have to do so much. You'd have to get a whole new identity. You'd have to get a new social security number. You'd have to have a backstory. Can you imagine trying to get a job or a bank account with a fake identity? Like, I'm sure it's possible to do. It would have been a lot easier to do in the 1890s than it would be to do in even the 1990s, much less the 2020s. Crazy, crazy story. And that's right here. That happened right in Pennsylvania. There was more information about the churches that they were a part of, and they weren't Amish. It was a similar religion, not maybe Quaker. They might have been Quaker or an offshoot of that, because there was a much bigger part in here that talked about the church that they belonged to in Pennsylvania, and the church that they were originally from Illinois, or his wife was originally from Illinois, I believe, and he moved out there for a while. That's how they met, and they weren't sure how they had met because of the different iterations of the churches and all that. It was kind of weird. I kind of left that out. So there's a part there that talks about this. It might seem a little confusing, but yeah, it was an interesting story there, but it didn't add much to the actual mystery, other than they lied. They flat out lied. And they got away with it too. It makes you wonder if there's any, like, if the town itself had put money into search and rescue, like if they even had anything like that back then, or if it was just all volunteer. If there was any way, like, could they try to get anything back from that? Like, what's the statute of limitations on lying about your death, on faking your death? Like, who's responsible for that after a while? I should look into that. That's kind of crazy. Because there is, imagine the Zedeker guy who's being accused of his murder, who did nothing, other than maybe being a bad neighbor. But you don't know the full story in that. It could have been the Lanes that were instigating things, and this guy just got a bad rap. It really makes you wonder, like, if he had, let's say someone just got really overzealous and they didn't like the guy. And we are talking about the late 1800s, so it was a different time. There's a very good possibility someone could have been like, you murdered my friend, I know you did it, because we know how people get their mind set on something and they will just believe it. And they could have, pulled a weapon and shot the guy. Then this guy would have been killed for no reason, for literally no reason. Who's to blame there? The person who shot him? Or, what drove him to that? What would have driven him to that? Would it have been, Harry Lane's fault because he faked his death? And there's this whole community was turned upside down for a year looking for him, right? To the point where they find the bones of a calf, of a little baby cow. And they're like, we found his body and it's on Zedeker's farm, and it's all kicks up again. And they're like, no, it was just a cow. I don't know. Let me know what you think. What do you think who do you think's liable for any of that? Or, was it just time lost? Was it all volunteer? I don't know how they handled that back then. I don't know if it was a concerted effort. I mean, people put rewards up. So this guy duped an entire town, an entire county. Wow. Imagine doing your ancestry and finding out that your like great-great-grandfather scammed an entire county. How would you feel about that? Like, I look at some of the things that happened in my family with my great-great-grandfather, and I just look at them. I'm like, wow, this is amazing stuff. His journey to the United States and across the country as a minister. And then I find other, I guess I kind of have something like that. Not a direct relative, but my great grandfather's brother. So I guess I make my great uncle, kind of removed. I don't know how that works, but my great grandfather's one brother was the head of the Scranton Fire Department back in the early 1900s, I believe. And he was charged with embezzlement. I do know that. I found that and I was like, ooh, that's not good. That's not good to have in your family. But I mean, he was caught. He was, it was found out pretty early, but he didn't con an entire county into like a year-long search. I mean, it might have been just as bad. I don't know. But yeah, I guess sometimes when you look at your ancestry, you got to realize you're going to find some good and you're going to find some bad. It's going to happen with anybody. But this would be a crazy thing to find out about your great-great-grandfather, your great-grandfather. That'd be nuts. So let me know what you guys think. Do you have any stories in your family that are similar to this, where you saw it and you were looking at your ancestry and you were like, ooh, that's not good? No, you don't have to give any names, but if you have anything like that, let me know. I find these things interesting because it was a different time back then, and this is what they thought was their only recourse, and it seemed pretty easy to do. This isn't the only instance of this, and there are plenty of stories where people just disappeared, or they, people thought one thing happened to them and they probably just up and left and moved. And you don't have to, I mean, they went to California, but when they say that his wife went to Illinois to be with her family, who knows if she really went there? I mean, she got on a train to Illinois, but could have gone anywhere. Could have gone to Illinois and hopped on another train and just kept on going. I mean, it's not hard to do. I mean, when I went to Arizona, the train took me, and there is a train that goes from Pittsburgh to Chicago. And then from Chicago, you can go anywhere in the country on a train. And the train I took, called the Southwest Chief, takes you from Illinois, and it takes you southwest all the way down through, where do we go through? We went from Illinois, we went into Missouri, we went through Kansas, we went through Colorado, we went into New Mexico, across into Arizona, and then from Arizona, that's where I got off in Flagstaff, but it continues on to Los Angeles, and that's where these people wound up. So did they take the same route? Like, it wouldn't be hard to do. It takes, I mean, it's hard because you are on a train for a long time, and, you know, modern trains, that trip takes 2 days from Illinois, from Chicago to Flagstaff, and 2.5 to almost 3 days to Los Angeles. So it's not the quickest thing. And back then trains are slower, so it took even longer, but it's doable. So you never know. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. As always, you can contact the show. If you got any of those stories, you can contact me at podcast@primitiveintelligence.com. I'd love to hear it. And wherever you are listening to the podcast, make sure you leave a like or a comment, subscribe, or, you know, whatever that platform does, follow or subscribe or join or however they call it. But go ahead and do that, and I'll keep the episodes coming. Thanks again for listening. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week. That's going to do it for me. I guess the end of this episode is my disappearance until next week. See ya.